Good afternoon and welcome to our meeting. AIIC USA would like to welcome you. Our meeting today is going to be broadcast on Zoom and streamed on YouTube. We're going to paste the link to the YouTube video and live broadcast in the chat, and you will be able to hear it. Please keep your microphones muted if you are not speaking. And also, you are welcome to ask questions in Zoom. You are welcome to raise your hands and ask your questions on YouTube. The meeting is being recorded, and that recording is going to be available later. We are also going to share the presentation of this meeting later. And for YouTube viewers, we are going to share the link to the PowerPoint slides in the comments. You are welcome. And now I'm handing over to Tony Rosado, the chair of AIIC USA. Tony, over to you.
Thank you, Cyril. Good afternoon, good morning to everybody, all of our members in AIIC USA and in AIIC Canada, as well as all other conference interpreters who are joining us from all over the world. It is a very happy day today because to us it's a pleasure to be able to hold this kind of meeting so that we can talk about the requirements to join AIIC and also to dissipate a lot of the urban legends, myths, and wrong ideas that are floating around about what it is that you need to do to become an AIIC member. I particularly want to thank all of you that are already AIIC members and that are joining us today, because besides the people that want to join as pre-candidates or as members of AIIC, that shows your interest on refreshing your knowledge of what you need to do to become either a presenter or a sponsor. And we really appreciate you being here. You are also welcome to ask questions if you need to do it. I want to thank also my colleague Natalie Bedard from AIIC Canada, as well as all the Canadian members that are joining us today. And for my AIIC USA colleagues, I want to tell you a couple of other things. Please remember that this coming week, we will be having an AIIC USA table during the American Translators Association conference in Miami. We will be there from Wednesday through Saturday. Please stop by if you're going to be there. If you know of any students or new conference interpreters that are going to be there, please let them know to stop by and talk to us. And then for also my AIIC USA colleagues, I just want to remind you that in 2 weeks, November 4th, we will be holding our annual regional meeting in Washington, D.C. The information is being sent to your emails already. That's for the housekeeping. Now, As far as the meeting today, I am going to gladly give the floor to our friends and colleagues from the Committee on Admissions and Language Classification, CACL, who are joining us from Europe, Darinka Mangino joining us from France, and Francesca Lotruglio joining us from Spain. So, ladies, the floor is yours. Please go ahead. Thank you. Daddy, you are muted.
I'm sorry. Hello, and thank you, Tony. Thank you, Tony, for this kind introduction, and thank you for joining us in a Saturday afternoon. That shows the level of interest that you have in what we have to share, and we're very glad that you're here because CACL is here to help you, and I'll explain what CACL is as one of the many committees that AIIC has. But I'm joined by another CACL member, Francesca Lotruglio, and what I'm going to share with you is mostly what you will read in the texts available describing the process to join AIIC. We know that it is a complicated process. We are going to do our best to make it as simple as possible. And if something needs to be clarified, please raise your hand, ask all the questions that you need explanation for. So let's get started. Well, who is AIIC? Who is the committee that Francesca and I are going to describe today? Well, who is CACL? CACL is composed of 7 active members of AIIC. We are volunteers, and we are the first point of contact that you might have with AIIC. We are in charge of reviewing all the applications that get to the doors of AIIC. So we are the ones who would review your files when your files are sent to the Secretariat and are considered to be complete. And we're going to analyze the details of that. So we analyze language classification and reclassifications for members, and also the changes of membership status. And we'll go through the details of what kinds of memberships are available in AIIC. So a very important fact that you need to have in the back of your minds is that we as a committee, well, this is what we do in general, but we meet 2 times a year. And that means that in those 2 meetings, those are the moments where we analyze all the files that we get from all over the world. So as I said, we are here to help you, but if you want to get more of CACL, we would like to ask you to remind that those 2 days, those 2 dates in the calendar. We meet in July and January. So that means that if you want to have your file reviewed specifically by CACL, that means to get more time to review your files, you can benefit from a service that we offer to those colleagues that send their complete files before the deadlines for submission of your applications. And that pre-screening service would be as follows. We get your complete file, and at least 2 members of CACL will review your case, and that would give us more time to analyze your situation, probably exchange emails, ask you for what you need to go to the next stage with all the documents that you need. Because what can happen is that you send your file and you're missing information. If you send your file right at the deadline, you will not benefit from that opportunity that CACL gives everybody who plans ahead of time and who just don't wait until the last minute to send their files. Because if you wait until the deadline, That means that CACL will not have a lot of time between the deadline and the meeting, and we will analyze your file as it was sent. And if you're missing information, or if we want to confirm details, it's very likely that your file might be put on hold if you don't have all the information, or you have to send CACL information to make it complete, or to give us the details that we need in each specific case. So that means that your file might have to wait until we meet again. So these are the first two important elements that you need to take away from this meeting, is that those 2 days in the year's calendar really matter, because CACL, as I said, it's a group of 7 members that we are willing to answer all of your questions as pre-candidates, candidates, and members who want to change their language classification, but we don't have all the time in the world. So bear in mind that, yes, there are deadlines to submit a file, but you can have more of us if you plan ahead. So May the 31st and November the 30th are the deadlines to send what you have to the Secretariat of AIIC, but you can have more if you plan ahead. So when you have your file ready, you have to send it to AIIC Secretariat, and you have the details here. And the process begins once we receive your application. So we as CACL review what you will send to us, your story, your application, and with all its components. But we also have to make sure that all the new members comply with the professional standards. And if you might have read all these documents or not, but we advise new members that you review all of what it's available on the AIIC website and the links that you see on the screen, to confirm that it is not only that you are an interpreter, but you work according to AIIC rules. That is why the process is, it goes beyond the fact that you have the technical skills to be an interpreter. So the process is based on a peer endorsement system. So that's why you need sponsors to vouch for your capabilities and also your ethics. And if you have doubts about that, there are plenty of documents available, like the lists that you see on the screen, that we will make it available for you. So what are your options if you're considering joining AIIC? Well, you have 2 possibilities. The first one is to apply as a pre-candidate or a candidate and enjoy a full membership afterwards. But what is the difference between these 2 possible paths to join AIIC? Well, as a pre-candidate, you need to be an interpreter, but not necessarily have worked 150 days as a conference interpreter to present your application to AIIC. And I want to make it very clear that this 150 days need to be in conference interpreting, because in some regions, and I believe it is the case, and Tony, you can correct me if I'm wrong, there are other modes of interpreting that are very common. For example, legal interpreting, medical interpreting, that you might have more than 150 days already in your background, but that doesn't mean that qualifies to apply for pre-candidacy or full membership in AIIC. So this has to be very, very clear in your mind if you work in a different field of interpreting. If what you do is only conference interpreting, well, if you have less than 150 days, you can consider this option. Probably if you have graduated from an interpreting program and you want to get closer to AIIC, this might be an option. So either joining as a pre-candidate or as a full member are 2 of the options. So who needs to vouch for you as a pre-candidate? Well, any member of AIIC. For a pre-candidacy, you only need 3 active members of the 3 signatures of active members already members of AIIC. And there's a difference between a sponsor, which is the kind of it's that you need the sponsors to become a full member, and you need presenters to join as a pre-candidate. And what is the difference between a presenter and a sponsor? Well, a presenter is a member of AIIC that they do not need to have the 5 years seniority that you need to apply as a full member. And the colleagues that will be your presenters for a pre-candidacy, they don't need to be part of your same region. So the requirements are more flexible than the case of applying as a full membership. So in that case, let's say, okay, I know that these are the two options, but I want to join as a full member. In that case, you need to have worked as a minimum 150 days as a conference in conference interpreting, of course, applying all the ethical standards that AIIC has in its code of ethics, and to have 3 sponsors. And in this case, the sponsors need to be active members of AIIC, have a seniority of 5 years, and they must have worked with you in the last 3 years. That is to say that the days of work that you include in your application, and you specify this day I work with Tony Rosado, for example, it must have happened in the previous 3 years, and this three-year period is important to note that it must have elapsed in the 3 prior years when CACL meets. It might be that, let's say that I work with Tony 3.5 years ago. Well, if I want to use that sponsorship, if Tony agreed to that, of course, well, it has to comply with a specific time period. Probably if we worked together 5 years ago, that date is not going to count if that is the date when I asked Tony to sign for those three signatures that I need to present to CACL to make it a complete file and to have all the requirements that you need to present. So for to become a full member, you need 3 active members with 5 years of seniority. So that's why we make a difference between presenters and sponsors, depending on the type of membership that you want to apply. So as a pre-candidate, you won't have voting rights when you become a pre-candidate. Let's say that through the process, you complete your file and but not public, and you won't be able to use the AIIC logo yet. You can add to your letterheads or websites or in their social media that you're an AIIC pre-candidate, but you cannot use the logo. So there are obvious differences and benefits that it's up to you to decide if you want to join as a pre-candidate or as a full member. And if you join as a full member, of course, you will have voting rights, and you have the possibility to use the AIIC logo, as you can see in our backgrounds. So those are the main differences between joining as a pre-candidate and as a member. So so far so good, I guess. So far we don't have any questions, right, Tony?
There's one question, Dari. Speaking of the presenters or pre-candidates, do the presenters have to be of the same language combination as the pre-candidates?
No, it's a presenter. So it's someone who knows that you are an interpreter, and the requirements are not that strict. And we'll go to that part. But and I have my guardian angel here, Francesca. If you want to add something, please let me know. But no, as a pre-candidate, it is a more flexible process, and you don't have to fulfill those requirements. And for a full membership, we'll go into the details. So When you join AIIC, you will also have to define where do you live, where will be your, well, not where you live, where your professional address, you want your professional address to be, which not necessarily needs to coincide where your domicile, the place that you live. So this is another question that you will have to add it to your application. What is your professional address? And you need to specify one place, because what we're sharing with you in this session are very general rules, but every case is specific. So this is when things get complicated, and that is why you have 7 pairs of eyes reviewing your files every time CACL meets, because we as interpreters, we travel around, we move around, and the fact that we have to specify a professional address is for practical purposes, because if you define, let's say I'm going to apply and I will be based in the US, okay, so that means that the colleagues that will sponsor you, the requirements that you need to fulfill is that at least 2 of your colleagues need to be of the same region. That is why you need to specify which will be your professional address. And it also, by specifying your professional address, you help the Secretariat make all the calculations for the regions of the membership dues that need to be paid as a member. Well, that is how they are calculated, based on in which region you're based, because each region pays a different level of dues, and that is why we have to specify where we're going to have our professional address. So it's easier for the Secretariat to calculate and to send you the fees the dues that you will have to pay at some point. And you can have a different professional address if you are moving to a different market, for example, but you can only do that change once every 6 months. So you cannot change, let's say during the summer, I'm going to be in Mexico and then I'm going back to the United States. You might do it physically, but in terms of your professional address, it has to be a change every 6 months. And that is also a practical fact that international organizations use to recruit interpreters. And that's why professional address is very important in those markets where there are recruiters that look for interpreters who are close to where their headquarters are. So there are many reasons why you have to choose one professional address. Now, language classification. Well, how we defined languages, well, CACL considers active languages and passive languages. You might have read these definitions, but for the sake of clarity, I'm going to repeat it. Your A language is your native language or languages, and all members must have at least one A language. Your B language is the language other than your native language, and of course, that you need to have a perfect command and which you are perfectly fluent, and into which you work from one or more of your other languages. And the passive languages, some people have more than one C, but a C language is the language of which you have a complete and perfect understanding and from which you work into your active languages. So this is when you look for any member's profile, you will see that it will read A language, B language, and C language. But for CACL purposes, the way we analyze your language classification, of course, it is based on the ABC description that you see on the screen, but we analyze language pairs. So it's very important that you think in those terms as well, because this is where we get a lot of confusion and a lot of questions in terms of who can sponsor me and who would be the best sponsor for my language combination. So the best way to explain it is this, and let's see if my image helps you understand how complex language pairs can be, and or probably will make it this confusion clear, because this is when we get the files, people ask a lot of questions because they think of the ABC classification, because this is what it shows in the in our profiles, but actually we need to have covered all the pairs that you apply for in AIIC. So let's think of when we are in the booth and you have your console. Well, you only can have active 2 languages, that is to say the incoming language and the outgoing language. So when you look for sponsors and you prepare your file, think of the language pairs that you are going to include in your application. If it's going to be English A into B, into Spanish, for example, so you have to consider, okay, my language pair, English into Spanish, who can sponsor this language pair, English into Spanish, Spanish into English, if that is the combination you're applying for. If you have an A language and 3 Cs, well, you have to consider my A into my first C and the other 2. So if you think your combination into language pairs, which is not usually what we do when we look for sponsors, it would make it easier for you and also for us to review through the process all the possible combinations that you're applying, and that you have those pairs covered by your sponsors. Now, your sponsors, as I said, if you're applying as a full member, if not, you only need presenters, but I'll repeat, they need to be active members of AIIC. They need to have 5 years of seniority and have worked with you 3 years prior to vouching for you. And of course, you have to have your list of at least 150 days. So you need 3 sponsors in total, and you need 2 sponsors per pair. So this is where it gets tricky, because some people think that you only need 1 sponsor per pair, and you might think, okay, so this pair is covered. So how many sponsors do I need? 3, 4, depending on the language pairs. Well, 1 sponsor can cover 2 pairs, for example, depending on the language combination that they have. Probably you find colleagues that have the exact language combination that you're applying for, and this makes the process easier in terms of understanding what kind of sponsors you need depending on your language combination. But if you have a language combination that is not very common, this is where it gets complicated. So think of the sponsorship in this term. So you need at least 3 for a full membership, but 1 sponsor can vouch different pairs depending on their language combination. So you need 3 in total and 2 sponsors per pair. I hope it's clear. And well,
excuse me, Dorinka, I think this is a good time for more questions, because there's
of course
tons of them. The next question is, do pre-candidates have to pay fees?
That is a very good question. Yes. I have a slide to show you how much you pay as a pre-candidate. But yes, in order to have your file processed, you need to pay a fee, and that activates the whole process. And in that fee, the pre-screening service is included. Well, it's part of the process, provided you send all your documents before 6 weeks before the 6 weeks before the deadlines. This is where we pre-screen, so you can benefit from that service if you present your documents with time enough for us to review. Every file is going to be reviewed, but you will get more time to fill in the gaps if there are any.
Great. The next question is, do online conference work also count towards 150 days?
Of course, online conferences do count, but you need to bear in mind that given the nature of some conferences, if you work, let's say, for a conference, because online conferences are shorter than in-person work. So we have had cases where people send 2 conferences in one day, which is, of course, you have to read the rules of AIIC. You have to have in mind all the code of ethics, how all of those elements we considered when we reviewed the file. So if you send us a file with 2 conferences in a day, we're only going to consider 1. So we consider days of work literally as days. So if you had 2 or well, if we get more than 2, that there's an ethical issue there, right? So, but we only count 1 day per meeting.
Yeah. The next question is, do you have to document all 150 days? And could just an email acknowledging that you work from the prospective employer or client count, or do you need the invoices?
Okay, there are 2 questions in that one. Yes, you have to document the at least 150 days. Probably you have 600 days, but for your application purposes, we need at least 150. If people want to send more, of course. And later on in the presentation, I will explain how you will send all of this information. Now we are in the process of working with a paperless process. So that means that you will have to upload with a specific formatting this information so we can review it. So yes, you will have to come up with a list, and you don't have to send us all of the invoices or the contracts, because depending how things work in your market, in some markets it's invoices are valid. Sometimes an exchange with the client confirming the assignment might be considered as a valid contract, just an exchange. But if there is an issue, if CACL wants to confirm that that date actually took place, yes, we will ask you for information, and it's better that you have everything organized to back up every single working day that you're going to include in the list. So you're not going to add everything to your every single invoice to your application, but yes, we do ask questions if we need to confirm details of the information that we get during the review process. But it's better to have everything there. But I mean, for accounting purposes, you have all of that information somewhere. So it's not that we're asking for something that doesn't exist. So it's already there. So it's just have it there in case we ask questions.
Just like dealing with a tax guy, right? Just be ready in case of an audit.
Exactly. Yes.
And Tony, we have one question on the YouTube channel, if you don't mind.
Okay, go ahead.
Very good. On the YouTube channel, we have several viewers who are asking questions. One of them is, if I don't have any colleagues or AIIC members, what do I do?
If you don't have any colleagues who are AIIC members and you want to join AIIC,
Exactly.
I would advise this colleague to make an effort to meet as many AIIC interpreters you can, because you would need an AIIC member to sponsor you. So it would be a huge obstacle in the process if you don't have any AIIC members sponsoring you. We need more, as I said, every case is different, and it might be that if the person asking this question is a speaker of a language that is not listed in the AIIC available languages yet, well, that is a specific case. It might be that no one in AIIC has your language combination, but you might work with members of AIIC, because if you're a conference interpreter, it is very likely that you run into AIIC interpreters. the fact that they don't have your same language combination is a different thing. So I would invite our colleague asking this question to provide a little bit more of information to understand that particular case. Because if you want to become a member of AIIC, let's say with a combination as common like mine, English, Spanish, and French, and you don't know anybody with that language combination who is an AIIC member, there's something that needs to be explained there. But if you are a speaker of, let's say, one of Tony Rosado's favorite languages, Nahuatl, of course, you won't find an AIIC member today that speaks Nahuatl in conference interpreting. So that is a specific case that requires a specific treatment. And not every single country in the world is part of an AIIC region. So those are specific cases as well. So that is why CACL needs a lot of information from you if your case is specific, depending on your language combination, your language pairs, where do you live. But in the US and Canada, there are plenty of conference interpreters that if you right now don't know anybody in AIIC, well, that would be my best advice to get to know your colleagues first, because you're going to join your peers. So if you don't know your peers, why would you like to join AIIC if you don't know the people who are part of AIICs and the rules? So there are many aspects that need to be known before you apply as a member of AIIC.
Okay, the next question, I'm going to read it as they wrote it. And it says, do you disregard 3 years during COVID-19 and regard 2019 as a valid year?
It depends on each particular case. And but if you want to be a pre-candidate, for example, before COVID, the period in which you could remain a pre-candidate was 3 years, and it was extended to 5 years. So there is flexibility in terms of those 3 years. But if you are applying for a full membership, you have to explain why you need more than 3 years. So as I said, these are the rules. This is what CACL needs to observe, but every different case is a different scenario. That, of course, and I'm going to get to the exceptions that you can apply for as well, but each exception needs to be well justified. Because if you live in a region where there are plenty of people who can sponsor you and you can find sponsors, well, there is something that you need to explain, or you need help to get sponsors. So if someone is trying to join AIIC without contacting first the region, introducing yourself and trying to get your colleagues, well, I would say that would be the first step if you, for the time being, don't have all the requirements met, because as I said, we are here to help you. So if you have questions, it's good to ask those questions and see where are the sponsors that you need, because it might be that you live in a region where your combination is not very common, but on the other end of the world, there are colleagues who can sponsor you. And this is where CACL and your region can help you make those links, because the world is big, but when it comes to interpreting, we all know each other and we can all help us out as an institution. And that is why we organize this type of exchanges because probably we know someone who might help you, but there are requirements. So of course, there is a will to help, but you have to do your share as well.
The next question is, can you have more than one professional address? I suppose for purposes of qualifying for pre-candidacy or membership.
Yes, you need to choose one. You can have, during the first 6 months of the year, one professional domicile, and the next 6 months you change it. But that's the rule. You can only change it once every 6 months.
Okay. Does private sector conference work count towards the 150 days, or do you have to work for international organizations or in diplomacy?
No. There are different markets in conference interpreting, and actually in AIIC you have there are we have the private sector and the agreement sector, and these are the two major distinctions. But of course you have diplomatic interpreting, but conference interpreting covers all of those three scenarios that the colleague mentioned. So no, and we do not make any distinction. Of course, if you only work in the private market, your clients might be different, but the requirements are the same. So the difference might be that you might have invoices or contracts to back those conferences, and there are nuances between the dynamics of these two markets, but no, there's no distinction.
Great. Next question. I told you there were plenty. Is can AIIC members work in different regions, or they have to work in their AIIC region?
Yes, I think we need more context here, because in general, we have a professional domicile for a purpose, but with RSI, let's say that an institution is based in Washington, for example, but you might be based in a different country. But if they recruit you, is because they might have gone through the list of the local interpreters, and if they cannot cover their needs, they might look for the closest region, and you end up working in a different region because the client is in a different region and they have exhausted their lists. So I think that in order to answer that question, it depends. And now with RSI, things are more complicated, but and we have to define if it's an in-person or an RSI. But in theory, yes, we usually work in a region, but sometimes we travel. If you travel with in diplomatic interpreting, for example, yes, you take the plane in your hometown or in your region, but you get to work in a different part of the world. So we have to analyze on a case-by-case basis.
Out of the 150 days, how many of those days do you have to work in your professional domicile region?
I need to understand that question.
Yeah, I think that it is, if you're counting towards your 150 days and you have some of them within, let's say, AIIC USA in the United States, but then you may have some other ones, I don't know, in Canada or in Australia or in Mexico. How many are the minimum you have to have, let's say, in the United States, if you're applying to be an AIIC member in this region?
I mean, what counts is the number of days, and because we as interpreters, we travel, we work in different places, so it's not the most important component. What matters is that you need at least 2 sponsors from your region. That's what in terms of the requirements that need to be met. But Francesca, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that it doesn't matter, right? The place where the meeting takes place, because we get
it doesn't matter at all. The only requirement is that when you work out of your outside your professional domicile, you have to be paid your per diem, your accommodation, and your plane tickets, if any, of course. But you don't have to fulfill that requirement in terms of a specific number of days working in your region. The sponsors have to be, 2 of the sponsors, as you said, have to be from the same region.
Great. The next question is, does the AIIC directory indicate whether the interpreter is a member or a pre-candidate?
Yes, if you as a client, let's say, look for an interpreter, you will only see members. if you are already a member and because you as a member will have access to your own profile in the AIIC website dashboard, you will have access to parts of the website that you can only access as a member. So there you can see who is a pre-candidate. You have more information as a member, but not the outside look of AIIC. For example, the directory that it's published, it won't show pre-candidates.
Okay. There's another question here that says that if you have recently moved, you've been a conference interpreter for a long time, but you recently moved and you moved to a new region, and in that new region, it says here the AIIC members are very exclusive. In other words, it's very difficult to work with them because you don't live in one of the biggest cities where most of them do their work. Is it possible still to get your sponsorship from AIIC members you worked with previously in the region where you used to live before you moved to the new region?
Provided you have two from the region where you state your professional domicile, it's fine. You can have two from your region and all of the colleagues that you work with before, and that would be fine. What I see in this question is that it might not be automatic, your acceptance in a new market. Probably that's what I'm getting from this question. And by acceptance, I mean, well, probably it's not the best word. What I'm trying to say is that getting to know your colleagues and colleagues getting to know you, it takes time. So it might be worth considering that if you're going to move to a new market, it's going to take time to build that trust, because who would vouch for a complete stranger? You might be an excellent interpreter technically, but vouching for someone, it's not just confirming that, yeah, when this person turns on the microphone, the output is good, but what about the ethical decisions? And that takes time to know and to get to know a person. It's not just that you work together and automatically it's people would vouch for you. And this is a question that we get very often. How do I get people to sign for me? Or when people come to us and asking for signatures and you don't know who they are, and they, hey, my name is John Doe and I want to become a, could you sign for me? Well, excuse me, but who would vouch for a complete stranger? So it takes time, and if you ask for signatures without people knowing you, it's very likely that you will get a no, and a very straightforward no, because what you are asking from someone is not just sign a paper. They're giving their name. They are vouching for you, so it's they're taking you under their wing in some sense, so it's not automatic. So I would ask the colleague asking this question to be patient, to knock on the doors of this new region and get to know the colleagues that are there. And I know that this AIIC is known to be exclusive, but one thing is being exclusive and another thing is fulfilling requirements. So it takes time. I mean, building 150 days and building trust between colleagues, it's not automatic. So it's I believe that it's very important to understand that peers will vouch for you. So in order to confirm that you're a peer, well, it takes time. It's not just about interpreting and just turning off the microphone and saying, okay, I've proved that I'm an interpreter. Being a professional interpreter takes a little bit more to prove.
May I?
Please do, Francesca.
Okay,
please do.
Because I perceive that in this question, the person refers to the general meaning of region. But when we say region here, during this CACL presentation, we are referring to the definition of region according to AIIC. So if this person moved within the United States, and let's say that before she lived in Texas, and her peers or his peers are from there, the ones who could sponsor this colleague, and now she moved to New York, she's still in the US region, so she can still use those signatures for sponsoring purposes. Thank you.
That's great.
And
And
Tony,
that's very common. Yes, go ahead, Cyril.
Tony, we have a question on YouTube if we have time. I think it's an excellent question, actually.
Okay.
What kind of info I should provide if I mostly work with a government agency and my interpretation details are classified?
In that particular case, you can ask that agency to provide a letter saying that you work for them and how many days you have worked with them, without disclosing any more information. But most conferences are public. Well, it might be it would be a matter of analyzing this case in detail, but sometimes if that government agency can, that's something that you can ask from them, not providing every single detail, but we need to know that you have worked in a conference setting for at least 150 days. So that would be a possibility, but it would have to be an official letter from this institution saying that this person has worked for so many days in this language combination. So yes, there's specific cases that require a specific treatment, provided the requirements are met.
And it's conference, right? That's important.
Yes, and it's conference interpreting.
And the next question is, do consecutive meetings count?
Yes, in the context of a conference, yes. If you do consecutive in court, that doesn't count.
Next, and this is a good one. Does working alone without a partner in a short meeting count?
To answer that question, I would go back to the Code of Ethics and what is a short meeting? Because that's very subjective. So a short meeting, what are we talking about? Because AIIC has a very clear description of how the time you can work with alone, which it's basically that almost we would need to have more details of what is short and why you are alone, because there are some press conferences that last 20 minutes and you work alone, but we would have to know more details. But the rules are there. I would invite the colleague to read the Code of Ethics, and there you will find specifically how long a conference can go with just one interpreter, and it's very short. It's less than 45 minutes, and so it's clear. It's there. So the answer is like you'll have it in the code.
In the United States region, there are not enough active members to sponsor my language pair. When can I be a candidate to get an exception?
If I may, we have a couple of slides to describe those exceptions, and if those slides don't answer that question, we can go back to this particular case, because we need to know which exception we're talking about.
Okay, there's somebody suggesting here something that, well, I'll just read it. Can you put down in writing on the AIIC website that court or legal interpreting settings are excluded and don't count? That gives the authority and finality to your answer today. Well, it's not conference, but anyway, that's the question.
Yes, I think that it's conference. It's the International Association of Conference Interpreters. So, to describe a conference, that would take a long time. But usually in court, you have dialogues. And in conferences, you don't have, you have exchanges, but usually there are very, there are many aspects that we can use to define what is a conference and what is not, but this is not the purpose of the talk. So, but in general, I mean, in a conference, you have one person speaking to many people, unlike other settings where you have doctor, patient, judge, defendant. So there are many aspects that we could use to make a difference. But in conference interpreting, the description of AIIC, I don't think it's necessary because it's clear. It's in the name. It's conference interpreting. I would invite those colleagues who don't understand the difference to read more about the differences between conference interpreting and all the rest. There are many other settings where interpreting is used and not and simultaneous interpreting is used, but it's not conference.
Yeah, just a shameless plug. I've been invited by ATA, from AIIC USA chair to give a talk about what conference interpreting really is next Friday in Miami. So if you happen to be there, we're going to talk about that specifically. I think that at this point, we can continue with the presentation. So thank you for answering all those questions.
That's where we're
And I want to say hi to Anna, because I didn't know she was here, but I just noticed that she's here too. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Very well. So, so far we have talked about the initial process to become a member of AIIC. But once you are an AIIC member, you can also make changes in your language combination. So if a member wants to reclassify or add a new language, the requirements for that change are different because you are already a member. So let's say that an active member wants to change his or her language combination. And of course, CACL would be the committee in charge of doing that, obviously. So if a member wants to change a C into a B, the number of sponsors that colleague would need to present to CACL, it's only 2. And there's no requirement in terms of region. And so it's 2 sponsors for each language pair that the colleague wants to present for us to be reviewed. However, if a member wants to classify a B into an A, well, the requirements are even more stringent than the initial process, because that colleague would have to present 5 sponsors to move from a B into an A. So this is an aspect that it's worth taking note, because it's not 3, it's 5 if you want to make a B into an A. So going back to the question that somebody asked about documenting your days worked, well, as we said, you need to document a minimum of 150 days to become a full member, amongst the other requirements, and at least 50 in each language pair you are applying for. So it's not 150 days between, let's say, Russian and Spanish. It has to be at least 50 for each language pair, and in total add up to 150. So, and I would like to clarify that training activities or practice groups are not considered to be a working day, because there is no payment involved, no negotiation of working conditions. That is why it has to be a real interpreting job what you add on the list, because it's very common that we join many of activities where you can participate as an interpreter, practice, or probably join trainings where you are heard by colleagues that could sponsor you, but we don't accept sponsors who are someone's trainers, for example, because we are peers. So if someone is going to sponsor you, that person needs to be your peer. It's very different that you were trained by someone and later in life, when you graduate, you become peers and you work with your trainers, that's a completely different thing. Not being sponsored by a current teacher, that is not accepted by CACL. So we please bear that in mind, because we would not accept those days, and it's very clear in the list of working days that we get when we get conferences that are not real conferences, that are practice. And it's not that colleagues are presenting information that is not true, but there's a misunderstanding that, okay, I worked with AIIC interpreters, but they were practicing with you, they were not your colleagues in the context of a training or a practice group. So bear that in mind, just to prevent those uncomfortable situations that you get a mail from CACL like, hey, we need to confirm that this day, what kind of a conference was that? Could you present the invoice, the contract? And in that case, well, you will have some days taken from your list if those are not a real working day as a conference interpreting. What else? Okay, so you have to prepare your list, and when you upload that list, and when I say upload, you will have to upload into a system, and the system that we are using for the time being is undergoing a lot of changes to make it better. So this is a working process that might require extra patience from your end, and we appreciate it, because you might have to work with a system that it's going to require patience because sometimes there are glitches in the system, because it's being adapted to be the best possible system for us to get the information faster and for colleagues to upload all the information that we need. But it's not working at the 100% right now. So, but you will be asked to indicate the date of your assignment, of course, the number of days worked, where that conference took place, the subject of the conference, the mode that you use, either simultaneous or consecutive. And for those sponsors that you are going to add to your application, we need to know when and where you to work together. So it's very important that you only specify the name of your sponsor for those days of work where your sponsors vouch for you, because you don't have to specify for the 150 days I work with this colleague. No. It's just for the specific day when your sponsor gave you their signature. So because sometimes we get lists with a lot of information that we don't need, and that I'm sure that required a lot of searching, a lot of adding names to a list that we're not going to use. So we only need the dates, the days with the specific name of your colleague, if that colleague is your sponsor and they're vouching for you that day. And the date matters, because we're going to count those 3 years based on when that conference took place. And we would ask you to present those meetings in a reverse chronological order. So bear those elements in mind, please, because otherwise it would make CACL work more complicated if you don't use the format. And the platform that you will use to upload the information will specify what you have to add first, and the format of recording or presenting the work days. So so that's basically what you need to bear in mind. So if you're just working on your list of days, well, it's better that you just make it little by little, because if you want to work on your list one day before the deadline, it's going to be difficult. So it's better to plan in advance and organize all the information, so the process goes smoothly for everybody. I believe there is a hand up. Should
We have
I
Heidi.
continue,
Heidi,
Tony?
please go ahead. We should maybe we can give an opportunity to Heidi to speak. So Heidi, go ahead, unmute it and go with your question.
Hi, thank you. Quick question, Darinka, on the subject of how many days does my sponsor need to work with me? Like, I understand that they need to work with me, but how many days, how many conferences out of the 150? Is there a specific number of days?
Thank you, Hedy, for the question. For CACL purposes, if your sponsor is vouching for you, we only need to know that conference when it took place. But for a sponsor to consider that they are ready to vouch for you, that is a personal choice. Some, I mean, I cannot generalize, but if someone came to me and asked for their sponsorship, I would expect to have worked with them for a long time, at least working, well, not during the course of 3 years, but I think that enough time to get to know the person. So I think that's a very personal choice, but for CACL, we only need to know when you work with your sponsor, and if the sponsor vouch for you, that means that they know that you follow the ethical rules, that you have the technical skills needed to perform at a conference. So I believe that I won't be able to answer that question, but it's more of a personal choice. But thank you for the question. It's a very valid one.
Thank you.
We have another question here. It says, in my market, most assignments are bidirectional. How to sort out my assignments according to language pairs?
I believe that's pretty easy, because if you only work from English into Spanish or from French into Portuguese, so one day covers both directions. So the platform will help you add the numbers. So don't worry. The thing is that you need to provide the right information so that the tally is correct, because it's the platform is going to help you find out where you need more days or not.
May I add something?
Please do.
Of course.
Okay, just with an example. For example, if during 5 days you worked from English into Spanish and Spanish into English, you have on the Excel sheet you have to fill in, you will have the column English into Spanish, and you put 5, which is the number of days. And then you have the column that is Spanish into English, and you repeat again 5. So that's the way to fill in the Excel sheet when you have bidirectional jobs. Thank you.
The next one, I'm going to read it as it was written. What if a conference has Q&A sessions where interpreters working from both languages A to B and B to A with relay function? Can it be considered 2 language pairs?
I'm trying to understand the question.
Yeah, that's why I read it. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. But if you were hired for that conference, that means that you have the languages needed for that particular conference. So working from relay, I believe it doesn't make any difference, right, Francesca?
No difference at all. If you work from relay, it's always a conference setting and it's valid. Mm-hmm.
Yes, may I just add that when it comes to relay, we have to go to the AIIC rules and verify when we should use relay and when relay is not recommended. Probably the confusion might come from there, because if we ideally should not use relay, and that's why we have language combinations, not to go through relay all the time, right? So, but if someone, let's say from Ukraine, is taking the floor, of course you have to take relay. Or if someone speaks in Chinese, you'll have to take relay. But I mean, I would recommend this colleague to read what it's in the text, what it's in the code of ethics, and how AIIC defines the use of relay to probably clarify that question. But we all use relay depending on the nature of the conference and the language configuration. So relay is common, but ideally we, as interpreters and the recruiters, try to get interpreters that most of the times interpret directly from the floor, from the speaker, but not to use unnecessary relays.
Sorry, may I clarify? I'm the one who asked the question. So I asked this question because I saw that it says work at least 50 days in each language pair. So my language combination is English B, Chinese, Mandarin A. So I'm not sure what that sentence means. Does it mean that I have to interpret from like English to Chinese for 50 days, at least 50 days, and then Chinese to English for 50 days for different conferences, or like for like a conference that requires me to interpret into English and into Chinese, it can be considered as a language pair. Like I'm not quite sure about that sentence.
Thank you for the question. Well, we cannot decide on the needs of the client. So there will be some conferences that you will be hired to interpret probably from English into Chinese only. But that information we need to know from you. And there might be conferences where you will work in the different in the other direction.
All right.
So yes, it gets complicated, but that's information that we will get from you. It's not that the conferences need to adapt to CACL's format of presenting the days. It's the other way around. So we based our analysis of each colleague's case on the nature of their work.
Yeah, because like for interpreters of English and Chinese combination, usually the interpreters work like both ways. It's because it's very hard to find the English aides who can do interpretation into Chinese. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you,
so-
Sophie.
May I add something?
Yes, Francesca.
Sophie, in your case, if you are applying for Chinese into English and English into Chinese, those are two pairs, right? So you need not only 50 days in each pair, you would need at least 75 days in this case for each pair, because the total of days worked should be 150. Did I explain myself? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Francesca. Somebody's asking how they can access the platform. I guess the platform to apply for pre-candidacy or for active membership.
Thank you. Yes, they would have to go to the AIIC website, and there is a section to join AIIC, and everything is explained there, and that the process starts there. And the way you send information, well, it's the process. You have to contact the secretariat and then pay the fee, and then the process will begin. So that would be the first step, to look into the website and start the process from there.
Great. Now you can continue. I think that we're current right now with the questions.
Very well. Thank you. So now let's move to the exceptions. And in CACL terms, exceptions are well, to ask for an exception, you will need a waiver. A waiver is a letter that you would send to CACL explaining your particular situation. And there are different exceptions that CACL considers. For example, a language waiver That means that you don't have all the sponsors for your languages. And it applies for those language combinations that probably do not exist right now in the list of languages in AIIC. You won't find any member that speaks your language. So in those cases, we accept a waiver and we analyze the case, and we advise the candidate to probably get signatures from other colleagues, even if they don't share the language combination, but that they confirm the ethics, they confirm that at least the delivery in the language pair that they do share is what we're looking for. We also have the seniority waiver in some cases that there might not be members that already have seniority. We do consider those exceptions depending on the language combination. And also if someone who lives in a country probably where there is no AIIC region yet, and probably they live in a region where the language combination that they use is not very common, and they can't find the two valid sponsors from the region, we can, based on the AIIC rules, accept these exceptions. Also, there are some language combinations that do not get the same level of work that some other combinations do. So coming with the minimum of days, it might be difficult, but it has to be a special case for CACL to accept this waiver. And there is another type of waiver for colleagues who have in their language combination a pair that they don't work into, and that is also accepted by CACL if they want to apply, even that they are not going to use one language pair, and we do accept those exceptions. So depending on what is your situation, you can opt for a waiver, and that means that we need to know what is your situation, what are the issues that you are finding, and if by analyzing what you sent to CACL, we define that yes, it's there are enough circumstances that would merit accepting an exception, we would grant a waiver, and members are accepted on the basis of yes, there is an exception, but there is no other way that they can join AIIC because of that person's reality and in terms of their language combination, and we do accept exceptions. But if you live in a region where there are enough sponsors, where there are enough people who can sponsor you, and it's not well justified, it might be that even when you send a letter, depending on the context, it might not be accepted. But these are the possibilities, and we do grant waivers, and we are very glad in some cases to accept a waiver for a language that doesn't exist in AIIC, and it's good news because that means that in the future, colleagues will not have the same issues finding sponsors for a language that before we didn't have in the association.
Somebody's asking, what about a language where there are only 3 members in our region, in my language pair, and they are only in certain specific parts of the country? Meaning, would I qualify for a waiver?
If you are in the same country, well, we would ask why you have not contacted those possible sponsors, or we would help that colleague make the link to the sponsors, because sometimes people probably feel shy, or they don't know that there is someone on the other end of the world that can be a possible sponsor. So if we as CACL know about your case, we can advise colleagues what to do.
Yeah, I think great. I think they're talking about, because there are cases in the US, we have 8 different time zones, and if there are only 3 guys and they happen to be 8 time zones removed from you, sometimes it's easier to get somebody, like if you live on the East Coast, it's easier to get somebody from Europe than to get somebody from Hawaii. It's much closer, for example. Yeah.
Yes, and we need to know what's going on to analyze each colleague's situation. But if you live in the same country, we would advise them to give it a try and then ask for a waiver, because waivers are granted, but it's not that would substitute a part of the process or a requirement that obviously could be fulfilled.
Yeah, and there's a lot of comments and questions about this, but I think that it's very clear on the waiver explanation that you gave. It's just variations of the same. So if you want to keep going so we can finish,
Okay.
thank you.
Very well. Okay, so the waivers, and depending on your case, well, try to get as much signatures as you can, and we will help people find the best solution to what they need. And as someone asked before, if there are people who work as staff interpreters, so it's very unlikely that they would cross paths with other colleagues. So there are cases that we, of course, will consider or help them get to contact other people. So think of your situation, and if it's eligible for a waiver, send us a letter in your file. So in AIIC, there are two types of members, the active members and the associate members. So once you're a member, ideally, will you stay as an active member most of your professional life, but it might be that you don't work a lot at some point for different reasons. There is a possibility for those colleagues who work fewer than 20 days a year to change their membership status. Probably they are planning to retire, or they have retired, but they don't want to cut the link with the professional activities organized by AIIC. So that's a possibility. But it's important to know that for the time being, associate members cannot be sponsors. So it might be the case that, yes, I know a couple of colleagues for a long time, but if they are associate members and if they are willing to sponsor you, their signatures will not be valid. So it's important to know the difference. So of course, as pre-candidates and full membership, and between active members and associate members, also there are differences. Basically, the dues that you pay as an active member and as an associate member, there's a difference because people are not working as an active member would. So this is an option, but please don't ask an associate member for their sponsorship, because it's going to be rejected, and that would make you, well, not waste your time, but not be published. If everything is in place and approved by CACL, you would have to wait for the next meeting and then look for another sponsor. So basically the process goes like this. You would prepare your file, make sure that everything is set and ready, and then move to the formal application process, uploading all the information, paying for the processing fee. And if, depending on when you send it, you might be pre-screened with the service I described at the beginning, and then you would have to wait until the next CACL statutory meeting of CACL takes place. And when we meet, we decide over all of the applications that we receive. And if everything is in place, well, those names will be published. There's a time between we meet and we get all the information together and the names are published. So sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's a couple of weeks, but it's very close to when we meet in July and January. So then a list of names is made available to all members, and there is a 60-day period in which members can, if they don't agree with a decision made by CACL, they can challenge a CACL decision, meaning that no, this person should not be become a member of the association because this and that, or they might spot a mistake in the list, and it's good that CACL also enjoys from the benefit of having eyes on the lists that are published, because sometimes, yes, and especially with the system being revamped and all of the changes that we're trying to make to make everybody's lives easier, sometimes there are mistakes. So sometimes there are corrections that are due to that. But basically, the 60-day challenge period is for members to say to CACL, I don't agree with this decision, and it has to be justified. And that process is called a challenge. So if a person gets challenged, well, that activates a process that takes place in absolute confidentiality. It's a very delicate matter if someone gets challenged. So it's part of the process. And after the 60 days, if CACL doesn't receive any requests, any challenges, that means that that list, that those names are going to be published and then will appear publicly in the directory that it's open for anybody to consult. So if a challenge happens, well, it triggers another process that it can get to if the person the person challenged doesn't agree with the decisions, well, it can be taken up to a different level, which is the executive committee, that it can be decided over there. But usually the process goes very, very smoothly when everything is in place, and when your colleagues vouch for you, well, it's a clear sign that everything should be okay. But there are cases, if someone is not following the rules, well, that is when most of the times, well, the reasons can be plenty, but usually it's people have to wait for the 60-day period just to allow members to make comments regarding the decisions CACL makes when we decide over the file. So basically, that is the process. Those are the possibilities. You have your choice of membership, from pre-candidacy and full membership, and that's how the process goes. So there are 23 regions in AIIC. So, and in terms of the dues that you will pay as a member, there are differences between the region you're in. But when it comes to processing fees, if you apply for a full membership, it's 150 Swiss francs, and for pre-candidates, it's 50 Swiss francs. So, the membership, sorry, it's 150, but the processing fee is 50 for pre-candidates. So this is the process, but I'm sure if you're here and if you are considering joining AIIC, you already have considered all the benefits that represent joining a professional association, and we as CACL are at your disposal to answer all of your questions. But please, before you come to CACL with questions, read all the documents that are out there, and we would be very happy to guide you in the times that we have shared with you. If you try to contact CACL in between the deadline and the meeting, well, it's very likely that you won't hear from us very, very soon. But if you try to prepare your file in advance with enough time for us to review it and exchange emails with you and ask you for information, the possibilities will be, of course, higher that in the next statutory meeting, your file would get accepted without any going back and forth asking more documents. So in a nutshell, that is the process. I hope it's very complicated. We know that's why we try to organize this these events. And thank you, Tony. Thank you, Cyril. Thank you, the US and Canada region, for being open and helping people get closer to us, because we want to make this process as smooth as possible, but it gets complicated because every case is different. So thank you. And if there are more questions, we have time.
They're asking you, if, just to confirm, if there's 6 weeks left before the deadline of November 30. So they just want you to say yes.
Well, it's a calendar.
Yeah.
It's a calendar. But yeah, well, the screening process. Well, it's the sooner you send your files, the better. But yeah, the calendar doesn't lie.
Yeah. Cyril, is there anybody in YouTube that is still waiting for a question to be answered? Cyril, do we have anybody on YouTube? Well, in the meantime, I think that Heidi has another question. Go ahead, Heidi.
Sorry, one last one about the domicile.
And maybe a final question from Heidi Gonzalez, and then we can wrap up.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, about the domicile, quickly. I understand.
There is no questions on YouTube, but there is a raised hand from Heidi Gonzalez. So Tony,
Yeah,
shall we give the...
Yeah, she's already talking, Cyril. Yeah.
Hi, about the
I
domicile.
believe so.
I understand that the reason for the professional domicile is that so that you are only hired by organizations that work with AIIC interpreters in that region for which you're registered. I understand that. If somebody lived a great part of the year, like half and half in two different countries, does that mean that while I'm in the other country, I cannot take any assignments from the organizations that are looking for AIIC interpreters? I understand that, but can I work private sector in the other country? So if I live, for instance, let's say that I'm saying that my professional domicile is the US because that's where I live for the second half of the year.
We have less than a minute left, so please.
Yes.
Sorry, so for the first half, if I'm in another country, can I work in that other country on a private sector?
Yes, but the professional domicile helps clients and you as well understand that you won't be a local. So you would have to be paid all the travel expenses and as if you were not a local. So of course you can work, we all can work anywhere, but there are rules. I mean, you can, depending on the region that you are, well, of course, if you have to respect the local rules. And when we move regions from region to region, the local rules might be different. So that's also what we have to understand when we change regions. And the thing is that if you move from one region to another, if it's if you will have to pay your dues. So it's important for AIIC to know where you are so they can assign the dues that you will have to pay based on the region where you are. So I think Francesca wants to help me out answering this complex question.
No, it's fine. Your reply is fine, Darinka. I erased my hand because I wanted to add 2 remarks, but at the end, sorry.
Okay, I think that we unfortunately don't have time for any more questions. Please keep in mind that our presenters are almost at midnight in Europe. We really want to thank them for being here with us for over an hour and a half. Thank you all for your participation. Please consider becoming a candidate or an AIIC active member. And if you need any help from AIIC USA or AIIC Canada, we are here, our members and our regional boards, more than willing to help you. So I'm just going to turn the floor over again to Darinka and Francesca so that they can greet you goodbye. And on my part, thank you so much for being here and enjoy your Sunday.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Cyril, and the US and Canada region. And I believe Francesca wanted to say something.
Okay, so before I leave the meeting, I wanted to remind you that there has been a slide change as regards processing fees, and now the processing fee for membership and pre-candidacy is the same, 50 Swiss francs. That's all. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you. Thank you, AIIC USA and Canada.